University. I am the co-lead of the Chapters program for Black in Neuro, but today I will be moderating the non-traditional NeuroCareers panel. For accessibility, we have live captioning that is available with the closed captioning live transcript icon that should be available at the bottom of your screen. If you would like to adjust the font, you can select the More icon, which is the 3 dots at the bottom of the window, and select Subtitle Settings. We also have a live interpreter that will be on the screen for this event. Our sign language interpreters today are Vidyam and Monique, and they should appear as panelists on your screen. Before we start, I want to thank our conference sponsors, including the Allen Institute, the Wu Tsai Neurosciences Institute at Stanford, the University of Minnesota Department of Neuroscience and Medical Discovery Team on Addiction, the Alzheimer's Association, Neurosity, and many more. Without their support, these events would not be possible. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge the fact that I'm joining you today from Washington, D.C., the capital of the United States and the land of the Anacostia tribe. You may know about the Anacostia River, or you might have been to D.C., but originally it was home to the Native Americans, the Nashatec people over 400 years ago. They were well-known traders throughout the Chesapeake area and cultivated agriculture throughout D.C., where some of the most historic landmarks reside today. I invite you to take a moment to reflect on the lands you're joining from, as well as your relationships to these lands and the indigenous people who continue to inhabit them. I hope you will be able to enjoy some of the other programming today. We have the Research Beyond Academia panel later today at 4 p.m. If you're unable to attend any of those sessions, check out our YouTube page, where all of our events from today, as well as the rest of Black in Neuro Week, are either available now or will be posted shortly. Finally, in honor of our 3rd annual BIN Week, we are offering a 10% discount on all BIN merch at our Etsy store. Use BINW22 for your discount today. Please buy our merch. Additionally, if you want to share any highlights from what you learned today on social media, please do so using the hashtag BINW22 or BlackInNeuroCareers. Again, that's BINW22 or BlackInNeuroCareers. So today, we will talk about Black in Neuro careers, mainly non-traditional. Neuroscience is often thought of as a field that's mainly academia, but in reality, it's a very broad discipline. There are a multitude of careers that exist in the field beyond traditional STEM professions. Today, we will have a discussion with our 3 amazing panelists about their neuro careers. And as a reminder, you're able to ask questions during the Q&A portion. So feel free to send those questions in the Q&A. I will give the panelists the opportunity to introduce themselves. Let's start with Mika.
Yeah, sure, I can go first. Hi, I'm Daniel. I'm a medical writer at Ogilvy Health Australia. So just a little bit of background about me and I guess how I got to where I am now. I did my undergraduate at the University of Glasgow in Scotland, where I studied neuroscience. And then after that, I did my Master's of Bioresearch in neuroscience as well at Newcastle University in the UK. Before relocation to Australia to do my PhD in human physiology, where I looked at translational stroke research. But yeah, now I'm working as a medical writer here in Sydney, where my role involves creating scientifically accurate content across a range of therapeutic areas, for various pharmaceutical companies. So it's lovely to be here. Thank you for having me.
I can go next. My name is Nika Ford. I'm from Atlanta, Georgia. I went to Georgia Southern University where I studied fine art, a bachelor's in fine art, and that's where I found out about medical illustration. I then pursued medical illustration and got my master's in biomedical visualization from University of Illinois at Chicago. I now reside in New York City where I'm a practicing academic medical illustrator at the Icahn School of Medicine at Mount Sinai. So I use art and apply that to medicine and science to help people understand it. I work with neurosurgeons and neuroscientists pretty frequently at my job, whether that's helping to explain their research or for presentations, grant articles, publications, and things of that sort. And I'm really happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Great, I think I'll go. My name's Portia, so I'm a consumer goods analyst as well as a neuroeconomist. So I've worked within financial services for quite a while now, working within investment banking, management consulting, as well as investment management as well. So what I do is I use neuroscience to be able to analyze economic decisions and use it to advise companies when they're analyzing businesses. So I'm here to talk to people in neuroscience about how they can pursue, careers in investment banking, investment management, or within management consultancy as well, and how to use their skills within that area.
Thank you, panelists, for introducing yourselves, and we are very lucky and very excited to have you. I'm going to start off the questions with how do you believe that your role is advancing your industry or the field of neuroscience? And you can answer in any order you choose.
Okay, I think I'll go. So a consumer company is basically a company which makes or sells products which are for the direct use of the buyer. So when it comes to investment management companies or investment banks such as Goldman Sachs or McKinsey & Company, where I worked, we loved using neuroscience because it allowed us to be able to access exactly what consumers were thinking. So prior to neuroscience, we had to rely on behavioral economics. And the problem with behavioral economics was that we found that people had biases. And also when we asked people to just tell us why they did things and why they did them, retrospectively, they would kind of come up with reasons which weren't very valid. So we began to use neuroscience to test people within the moment and find out exactly why they were doing what they were doing. And because of this now, when it comes to, measuring consumer research or market research, it means that we're getting more valid ideas. And for that, we can use to make better business decisions.
Oh, sorry. Okay, thanks. So I would say for me, art is a universal language. I think that everyone can understand a picture. And so I think that the way that it's influenced or changing the neuroscience field is that it's really helping people to understand, especially very complex science and neuroscience. And through working with different clients and partners, I've learned a lot about how the brain works, whether that's the anatomy of it or the physiology of it, and applying art to that to help lay audiences understand has been very helpful for anyone really to clarify the information, as well as expert audiences too. So some of the illustrations that I've done for article publications are read by other neuroscientists. And so I think that having a visual there is really helpful to understand someone else's research, if it's your colleague or someone that you may be working with. And I think the same goes for neurosurgery as well. I've done some neurosurgery illustrations and just being able to visually see what's happening. Sometimes a photograph or surgical photographs are not very clear because there's other things in the way obscuring the view. So I think illustration really illuminates what's going on in the surgical room or surgical procedure through that medical illustration. And so it can help all kinds of audiences really understand the material within this field.
And well, I guess for me, medical oration or medical communications really involves providing consultant services to the pharmaceutical industry in order to help raise awareness for medicines or products, etc. So, and I guess medical oration in particular really is the foundation of the work that a medical communications agency will do. So We work as part of a larger team of, other experts in other fields like designers, creatives, etc. But really, I guess the foundation lies with us, and we are really involved in, making sure the scientific rigor is there for everything that we do. So in that sense, the industry really can't function without medical writing as its foundation. So yeah, I guess our role is very important in how the business runs and operates.
I'd say that for me, when it comes to consumer good businesses as well as investing, one thing that we kept on noticing was that new products were failing. A lot of new businesses were failing as well. And when we test people and, just ask them whether they'd buy something at a certain price, they'd say yes, but then they wouldn't. So what neuroscience has allowed someone such as myself to do is be able to work and also kind of correctly anticipate and estimate what the hypothetical bias will be. So for example, if 70% of people say, oh yes, I will buy this, I should be able to measure the people who actually won't buy it, which is probably about 45%. So using brain activity as well as experiments have allowed me to kind of create new models which make me know exactly what these numbers are and allow companies to be closer to projection and lose a lot less money.
That was all very insightful. I learned so much just in the short amount of time that you guys were able to answer that question. All of you kind of touched on the idea of neuroscience and how it's influenced your careers, but I'm also curious to know, being Black and in neuro, how has your identity influenced your career choices or the way that you intend to make an impact in your industry?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think being Black in neuro, I guess speaking for myself, like still feel very underrepresented in that sense. And I feel like within this region that I find myself in, I often feel like I guess I'm a leader in that sense. So it does bear a certain sense of responsibility. Like in doing my PhD, I only knew like one or two other people, who were Black, who were in neuroscience within that whole institution. So, and I guess even now working outside of academia as well, like representation is so important. So the hope is that, people can see me or people like us in these positions and inspire them to also kind of, want to go down these avenues as well. So yeah, I think it's just all about like showing representation in like, these really interesting kind of like high achieving areas.
Being Black in neuro means so much to me. So when I started my career, I was at Bank of America Merrill Lynch. I was investment banker in mergers and acquisitions, where I wasn't just one of the only few women, but I was definitely the only Black women. It was very old boys, it was very white male. Then after that, moving within, investment management and management consulting, I was usually the only Black woman in the room. And one thing that Black in Neuro has given me is it's given me this brand new community where I can meet people such as myself, but also give advice to undergraduates who are within neuroscience and also liaise with companies on their, internship schemes and so on how they can attract underrepresented talent such as myself.
I can just attest to so much of what Daniel said, and Portia, really just being underrepresented in my field. And medical illustration is such a very small niche field that there's only a handful of Black medical illustrators. So I think that for me, it's just very important to kind of show that representation and to also within the work as well, not even just me as a person, but in the actual work that I'm creating. There's also been a lack of representation of Black and brown people in the illustrations. So that's something that I think I've really tried to work on and change, and shapes really like my identities, like who I am, and then how I portray myself and other people in the work that I'm creating.
You all touched on the idea of being underrepresented, which is really important. And I definitely want to direct this question to what you just said, Nika. Over the past few years, light has been shed on the issues regarding the lack of diversity in medicine, particularly medical illustration, and the damage it's done on communities of color. So I'm just curious to know, what do you hope to see change in your field in the coming years, and what legacy do you hope to leave or create in the medical illustration field?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think that when it comes to patients understanding their health, it's really important that they see themselves reflected in the material for several reasons. And I think the main one is just understanding it. If you don't really connect to the material that you're reading about your health, you're not going to really internalize that information and get the most out of it and really learn from it. So I think that is such a huge influence that medical illustration has on people understanding their health, like health literacy and health education. So that's an area that I really hope to make an impact in. Also, when it comes to medical professionals and training, people who are studying to become neuroscientists or neurosurgeons or any other really medical like professional field, just the material that's being studied in the textbook should be reflective of like the diverse bodies in our world that we live in, the multicultural world we live in. Because if it's not, healthcare practitioners will then eventually rely on like generalizations and stereotypes to fill in like lack of knowledge of how they know that like medical conditions present differently on different people. So I think it has a huge impact on patients' health in that way, and also in medical training. And I think the impact that I hope to leave is just to show other young people, like other young Black girls and boys, that this is a career field for them. I think one of the main reasons why there's so much underrepresentation is a lack of awareness about it. So I really hope to like show them that, you know, this is an option for you too.
Thank you for that answer. I mean, that's absolutely inspiring. Daniel, would you want to speak on that as well? I actually have a question for all of you, and it's coming from our Q&A portion. When you first started your degree programs, did you know what you wanted to do, or did you know that you wanted to do the career that you are in now?
No, I didn't actually. So my first degree is in mathematics with economics. So my initial plan was to do a PhD in mathematics and basically become a mathematics professor. But as I began to study the economic side of things, I really got into the concept of just finding out why people did what they did. One of my first studies was analyzing social mobility within Black communities. So comparing African Americans and Black British people. And I found that, you know, even though I loved calculus, I loved numbers, they just weren't telling me enough. So I wanted to find out more. I began applying psychology, and then obviously it led to neuroscience, and that's where I am today.
No, like similar to Portia, I also didn't know this is where I would end up. When I started my like neuroscience degrees, you know, I thought I would continue down that path and stay in academia and, you know, so on and so forth. But yeah, I actually really only discovered, you know, medical writing and like this whole like industry or sector, I think it was like halfway through my PhD. So prior to that, I didn't even know that this was an option. So really, yeah, it was eye-opening seeing just how much is available and how much opportunities are out there, like out with academia. So yeah. No, I didn't know, but yes, very, very happily landed here and haven't looked back since.
And echoing on Daniel, I didn't even know that neuroeconomics existed till 2 years ago. So I definitely wasn't expecting to end up here.
I also didn't know about medical illustration either. I wanted to be an artist. I went to art school. When I was finishing up my bachelor's degree in art, I found out at the end of my junior year that medical illustration was a career field. And that was because with my artwork, I was already interested in anatomy. I just thought anatomy was just amazing. So I was actually creating like surrealistic paintings of anatomy, not even realizing medical illustration was a thing. And one of my illustration teachers saw my paintings and said like, oh, have you heard of this career field? And when I researched it, I realized that that was exactly what I wanted to do. I had always had a love for science, but I had no idea that I could actually combine it with art. And so before I went to grad school, I took science courses as a post-bac student to get those prerequisites because I only had a background in art. I had no like scientific knowledge. So I needed to get that background before I actually applied to grad school. Yeah.
Amazing, amazing. All of you kind of touched on this already, but I definitely want to, start with Daniel with this question and kind of work our way around. First and foremost, you completed your PhD in stroke research, so congratulations, that's like a huge deal. But what made you want to switch to medical writing, and what skills do you leverage from your experience in this new role? And that would go for everybody. What skills do you need to do your industry?
Yeah, yes, thank you. Yeah, I recently just finished my PhD, and it was a really enjoyable experience. I think overall, like I have no like negative um, feelings towards academia in any way. Like it was, I had a really good time. But I think for me, there were two factors that really contributed to my not wanting to stay in academia. And the first is security, essentially, in the sense that I just personally did not, like the idea of having to, jump from postdoc to postdoc and, apply for like funding for like, a salary every few years. I just didn't like it just wasn't sustainable. So I wanted something that was a bit more secure. And then secondly, as well, I think is I didn't see myself really wanting to, become a tenure track professor or to, set up my own lab or be established in that sense. Like I loved research and I loved doing science, but the end goal wasn't what I wanted. And just again, just adding to that as well, I think doing research in academia, although I worked in translational stroke research, it still wasn't very, patient focused. Like I didn't feel like I was making a direct contribution to people's lives. So taking all that into consideration, I think I kind of wanted something that I could still, do research and still do science, but it was secure and I was, felt like I was making an impact. And that's where medical writing came in the sense that, the work we do has a more direct effect on patients. It's a lot more secure as well. And I think I can leverage a lot of what I've learned in my PhD in this work in the sense that, you have to have a strong scientific background, like critical appraisal of literature, both scientific and clinical is a big part of what I do. So I'm still kind of using those skills every day. As well as that, I think because the industry is so fast paced as well, you really have to learn how to, become an expert essentially in therapeutic areas that, wasn't your expertise in your PhD. So you're constantly learning, which is also something that's really great. So definitely there's a lot of, I guess, cross like skills in terms of like what I've done that really apply to what I'm doing now. But yes, for all those reasons, that's why I left. And yeah, again, I wouldn't like no regrets whatsoever.
I'd say that for me, well, first of all, academia is very hard. Doing a PhD is incredibly difficult. And when I started doing mathematical methods to analyze information, I realized that I was looking at the abstract mathematics, but I wasn't learning about the people behind the numbers. And one of my professors, actually, who is a neuroeconomist, he told me, don't ask the people, ask the brain. And that was what led me to thinking, okay, I shouldn't be just looking at these numbers in this lab. I want to go out and meet the people. I want to know exactly what is going on. And I think that's what led me through to industry. It was a bit of a mistake. I was at a careers fair and I was just given a pamphlet and I said, okay, I'll do an internship. However, echoing what Daniel did say, from a social mobility standpoint, I can definitely understand why people don't want to go into academia due to the salaries, as well as the fact that a tenure track position or, finding a postdoc can be incredibly difficult. So I'm here basically to speak about going into industry. That is an option. And don't feel, any sort of way if you finished your PhD and you decide to go into industry.
Yeah, I feel like I didn't really know what to do with my art degree when I was in undergrad, and for some of the reasons that Portia mentioned, I thought about teaching art, and I feel like I didn't really want to do that. And when I found out about this field, it kind of just clicked for me as a way to really have like a lucrative income as an artist, and then also being able to explore my love for like science and anatomy too. So I definitely think like a salary was a part of the reason why I chose this field. And then also I was able to really combine or marry two interests that I had and I didn't realize could be married together. Yeah, I think that's pretty much why I chose it.
All of you touched on when it comes to your industry, something that is completely different from academia. So I definitely want to give you your brag moment here and tell me something that is unique to your career path that others might not know about or get to see in other sectors of neuroscience.
I think by default, scientists are quite shy. So I think all of us are quite shy. However, I would say that, I was the first person in my workplace who had a master's in economics as well as a master's in neuroscience. I'm quite proud of that because there aren't many people who have been able to, make that cross and have both, the mathematical side of things as well as the biological or physiological side of things. So that's something I'm quite proud of, just both qualifications as well as the fact that I'm being funded by King's College London to lead one of the first large neuroeconomic studies.
I think that something unique in my career path is that beyond art and science and the things that I mentioned, there's a lot more that goes into it and into being a medical illustrator. And I think that's being able to also utilize conceptual thinking and color theory, design principles, all that goes into creating medical illustrations. So like when I'm working with a neuroscientist, it's not just like applying art to it. Like there's a lot behind the process, the collaborative process and the individual process that I take, because I have to do my own research on the research that I'm depicting too. So I'll get information from the client. They'll maybe send me a draft of their paper or a summary, an abstract or something like that. But I also additionally have to do my own research. So I think that a part of medical illustration that's not really known to like the viewer on the outside, if you're not in the field, is that you really have to be really skilled at research and understanding design principles and conceptual thinking too, because you're putting together an illustration that's telling a story of something in order to make sure the audience is recognizing the information that needs to be told. So the information has to be packaged in a particular kind of way. And so there's a very in-depth process to creating a medical illustration that allows you to really tap into other parts of your brain too, that you're not just going to use as like a general artist.
Yeah, sort of, I guess, echoing from what Nika just said as well. I think a thing that's really interesting about, like, I guess where I find myself now is I get the opportunity to do like a lot more creative writing as well in my role, and not just so much straight fact science writing, which is really interesting because that's something that, I didn't have any formal training in, or nothing really that I've done before. And it's so interesting how different it is too, and the approaches are so different, and the way you think and conceptualize is so different as well. So it's definitely like something that I've, really sort of enjoyed. And yes, it's been challenging because I'm so used to, thinking like a scientist and an academic, but, learning all these new skills by working in such a big agency that has so much like, talent that's just not in the sciences. I think you get to pick and learn a lot of different things from lots of different people who have other skills that you probably wouldn't have come across. So yeah, it's been really rewarding in that sense.
All very interesting things that outsiders would not know. So thank you for answering that. One question that definitely came from the chat is, what are some surprising cons of your industry jobs that people should consider?
I think that, this was actually something that I wanted to speak about. So I've spoken about 3 separate career paths, which I'm aware of. So investment banking, investment management, as well as management consulting. I would definitely say that, each career will depend on your appetite for people, as well as your personality type. If you're a bit more introverted, you might be more suited to investment management or perhaps investment banking. Management consulting, being at firms such as McKinsey is amazing, but you are seeing clients every day, and you do have to be quite extroverted. So I do think that with all 3 of them, they're quite different, and you have to think about what suits your personality more. I do think that people coming from academia into industry, it's such a different environment. And, we're used to doing things our own way, and we're used to quite similar people. Within the corporate environments, you're going to find that there are so many different sorts of people, and you have to decide, your appetite of socializing and just how far you can push yourself when it comes to speaking to people. So I definitely say that that's a con and something that people should think about when choosing which way to go.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think one thing that's, I guess it can be a con if people aren't aware of it, is just the fact that with, I guess if you're so used to like working and researching in academia, you know, publishing first author papers, you know, you kind of, it's your own work, like it's your baby, you get like all the credit and the accolades for it. Whereas when you're writing in medical communications, you know, I guess there is no direct authorship in the sense that what you write, you know, you're writing for clients, you're providing a service. So if like you're really attached to the idea of like, you know, work being yours, or, you know, wanting, you know, like the praise for the work that you do, like it might be like a little bit of a adjustment in that sense. But yes, I mean, definitely it's just something to be aware of, but I don't necessarily think it's like a con either, just a heads off, I guess.
I can't think of really too many cons either, but I will say that it's a very, very competitive industry. Medical illustration is extremely niche. So I think in that way it's very competitive. So I would just say that it definitely, if you try to go into it as like a full professional, being really skilled in artistic concepts such as like lighting on form, being able to understand how shapes are rendered correctly, practicing still lives and things like that are really important to be able to, I think, compete with others in the field. And then having a scientific background and knowledge. And I think if you come from it from a neuroscience standpoint, then you already have a lot of that science knowledge. So it would really just be a matter of like really fine tuning your art skills. But I would say, and it's not even a con, I just say that's the difficult part about the field, is that it's very competitive.
Thank you for answering that question. And on that note, I definitely want to ask you guys, this came from the chat, as a person from an underrepresented group, have you experienced discrimination, whether that be in the workplace or if you feel comfortable disclosing with in terms of salary? And if so, how did you deal with that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I guess personally, I can't say that I have in the workplace, or even more generally in that sense. I think my company is pretty good in terms of like, I think they're really trying to push for diversity and inclusion in like what they do and how they do it as well. So I think, especially after the last few years, I think that's like a really, you know, important like initiative for lots of companies. So I think they're really kind of doing a good job to push that, and to push that in an authentic and genuine way as well. So yeah, I guess I'm fortunate enough that I haven't had personally that experience.
I'd say that for me, I'm incredibly cognizant, not just of my experience, but you know, of the experience of everyone around me. And I definitely say that one thing that I noticed as soon as I got into finance was just the underrepresentation, not just of Black people, but also, you know, if people had gone to state schools. However, one thing I have found over the years is that it has been getting a lot better. A lot of firms have begun doing outreach within underrepresented areas. And as well as, you know, reaching out to state schools, we now have firms such as SEO London. So if you've got any undergrads here, there are firms such as SEO London, and they're basically focused on, you know, helping Black students get into the top firms. So, you know, we're not quite there yet, but I have noticed that within my industry, things are getting much better.
I would say that really in any underrepresented industry, you're going to experience things like microaggressions. And so one of the things that I'm doing now to combat that is like, I'm the diversity chair of the Association of Medical Illustrators, and we're doing a lot of outreach. And so I think that once a field is just more integrated with diverse people, you really don't experience things like that. And so that's something that we're working on, kind of like what Portia said, like outreach to just bring more awareness about the profession, so that more Black and brown people can enter the field and really be involved and be a part of it, so that we have that community within it and sense of belonging.
All of you definitely touched on the idea of definitely advocating and trying to make sure that there is sort of space for people who are underrepresented within your fields. And I want to direct the question to Portia. So your work has been referenced in several media works, including Entrepreneur Magazine, one of my personal favorites, Crash Course, economics. And I just wanted to ask you, what inspired you to want to educate or share your knowledge with others through media platforms, such as this one?
Oh no, that's absolutely, what a great question. So when I joined social media, at the beginning, I did it just to, connect with my peers. But I found that as I began to share economic information in a more digestible manner, it was quite bizarre because I found that the age group which followed me the most was 13 to 18. And I couldn't quite understand why. And then doing further digging, I realized that the people who were following me the most were actually students who were interested in economics. And every single day I'd get questions from them on their homework, or what I thought about something that was going on in economics. And I think that kind of drove my passion to kind of give news in digestible ways for people who, I don't know, whether because of school, whether because of home, some of the language was just a bit too complicated for them. I found that, platforms such as Twitter and Instagram allowed me to give them that bite-sized information. And still till today, my follow account, I am followed mostly by 13 to 18-year-olds, and they're the ones who message me the most, just asking for help with homework and that sort of thing. So I found that, the media really helps in that sort of way for underrepresented children to be able to access people such as myself.
Absolutely amazing. I definitely empathize with that, where economics sometimes can be hard to digest. So breaking that down is just absolutely amazing. I definitely have a question directly towards Daniel, but I would love if or Portia can speak on this as well. So definitely moving from academia into industry, did you feel qualified automatically for the roles that you have now?
Sorry, is this question for me or?
Yes, we can start with you, but feel free to
That's a good question. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily say I didn't feel like I'm unqualified for it. I think just because it's a different industry, I guess coming straight from academia into somewhere new where, yes, there are some transferable skills, but there's still like a lot to learn. So I guess maybe there was an initial sense of imposter syndrome in terms of I guess just the scale of what had to be learned. But no, I think I was pretty, I just had to kind of leverage on what I had learned from my PhD and kind of hold that and be confident in my skills and my abilities. So I think I kind of came into it with an open mind and kind of took the learning as an opportunity. So no, I didn't necessarily feel unqualified. Yeah, I think just kind of making the most of the opportunities. But yes, definitely the PhD helped for sure. I think if I hadn't had that few years of experience prior, it would have been very daunting to come into such a profession without doing significant research, because you don't need a PhD to be a medical writer. You can come into it without a PhD, but yes, having the PhD definitely helped in that sense.
I'd say that, well, anything is scary at first, but I did find the jump from academia to industry quite difficult. What I will say is that a lot of the skills which you learn as a researcher or as a scientist are immediately transferable to my industry. So, the financial models, the analysis of the businesses, it's far simpler than the sort of analysis that we do. One thing that I would say that I found personally, and people I know found difficult, was the culture change. So you're going from an environment where people simply want you to defend your own personal arguments and speak about your work, and usually, the work of a tiny team. But then you're going into an industry where there are different sorts of people, different personalities, and also it's not quite all about you and your research anymore. You're working within a larger organization to meet a common goal. So I definitely say that, the cultural changes were quite hard, as well as what I said prior. I was quite an introverted person. So becoming client facing and traveling and meeting people, that was quite difficult. But I'd say that, you know a lot more than you think. And I just found that, after a few months, I got a hang of it.
I would say that like going into industry, I think for me, the biggest change was like working with clients, like face to face, actually working with clients. But I feel like I really grasped it pretty easily. I think that like as an introvert too, as well, like a lot of artists are introverts. I think a lot of times when I meet with a client, it is one-on-one, so it's not really that intimidating. At times, maybe when I'm in front of a lot of people, maybe that's because I'm presenting about medical illustration. At first, it was a little bit nerve-wracking, but that's also part of my job, is letting other people in other departments at the hospital and medical school know about our services. So after I started presenting a few times, I got really comfortable in front of people. So that was definitely a change, going from the academic setting in school to working in industry, being client-facing, and then also giving presentations about what I do. That I got pretty comfortable with pretty quickly, and ended up like really enjoying it.
Wow. I definitely have a question for you guys in terms of experience. So as an undergraduate student, I feel as if for those of us who are in the community, we don't really hear too much about industry jobs in general. So I just wanted to ask, how do you feel that either the neuroscience community can support industry better, in a sense?
I wanted to actually touch on this. I think that, a lot of neuroscience undergraduates, and particularly Black neuroscience undergraduates, just aren't aware of the programs which are accessible for them. So if you're an undergraduate, for example, during your first year, there's something called a spring week. So, during your Easter holiday, or I believe Americans call it spring break, a lot of investment firms or management consultancies, they will invite you to come and spend a week at the firm. You can apply to that. So, in probably October, just type in the word spring week, and you'll find, all the jobs listed. That's an option for you. If you're a second year student, a third year student, or a PhD student, there are summer internships, there are off-cycle internships as well. For PhD students, someone such as Daniel, who has finished his PhD, there are industry jobs where you'll be able to come in as an associate. So you'll be able to skip analyst level and go straight in. So there are quite a few opportunities available. I can't emphasize and, just say so much about SEO London. SEO London is a firm which works, directly with underrepresented people to be able to get them into law firms, investment banks, and management consulting. And it's brilliant because they do it from undergrad, postgrad, but also people already professional as well. So I'd really, really recommend them.
Yeah, I guess in my experience, I don't think that academia does a great job in terms of advertising careers outside of academia. I'm not sure how it is in a broader sense in other institutions, but just from like my experience in like all the universities I've been to, I think, like even if they have career days or stuff like that, I don't think they do a good job in really showing you like all that there is out there, which is a shame because like I think we've all touched on prior, like many of us, we've sort of just fallen into this career without really knowing too much about it, like until like very recently. So in that sense, I think just like mentorship is probably like a really, really, integral thing to have for like a lot of, I guess young scholars, particularly Black and neuro scholars who kind of want to go into or explore like all these different avenues. I think just having someone that's either already established in there or someone that has some experience or some context really goes a long way. Because without that sort of link, you're really left not knowing what all your opportunities are.
I've actually never thought of that as like how neuroscience can support what I do. I've always thought about it in the reverse, like how medical illustration supports neuroscientists or people that work in neuroscience. So I guess to that question, I would say like collaboration is the first thing that I think of. It's not really like me doing a service. It's more of like collaborating with a neuroscientist or with someone in that field. So maybe just more conversation about the collaboration aspect of it. Like I'm working with a medical illustrator, not a medical illustrator is working for me, like kind of like changing the way that we discuss it too, because it is a collaborative effort. An illustration that I've done before actually caused the physician that I was working with to like reword a part of his article, because seeing what I'd illustrated made him like clearly visualize that the way it was written prior wasn't exactly what he wanted to say. So it's really a collaborative effort. It's like the art is not just like a little piece on the side or like a service, it's a collaboration. So I think just talking about it more in that way and like more awareness about it.
First and foremost, that's amazing that your work was able to inspire the physician to really change his work. I think that's absolutely amazing. And definitely something that Daniel touched on earlier that I want to ask all three of you is that one of the bigger parts of academia is definitely mentorship, and they emphasize that, especially at the graduate level. I want to know what mentorship looks like in your industries, and how does it differ in expectations, maybe from a mentee standpoint, or if you are a mentor to somebody from a mentor standpoint compared to academia?
So mentorship has been like very paramount for me in my industry. When I was in graduate school to becoming a medical illustrator, they actually had a mentorship program at the University of Illinois, Chicago. And I think all of the schools that offer an accredited degree in medical illustration do a mentorship program because I understand like how helpful it is. And even after I graduated, joining the profession, which is the Association of Medical Illustrators, like our professional association, has a mentorship program there as well. And I actually became a mentor after graduating with my degree. And it was really rewarding to be able to have two medical illustrators who are like currently in school, you know, working with them and kind of like helping them along their journey and really like, I guess, showing them the things like the mistakes that I made so that I could help them through their, you know, graduation and also landing jobs. So mentorship has really been important. And even now, like as a professional, I've been practicing in the field for like almost 5 years now professionally. There are people that I look up to still as my mentors. So I think I've been a mentee and also a mentor. And I think it's been like very, very instrumental in the things that I've learned and in my success.
So I was a mentor for Mind, which is a charity here in the UK, so assisting kids and tutoring them in mathematics. But I'd say, what's the difference between mentorship in academia to corporate? I personally found that, you know, in academia, you can be quite siloed. Sometimes it can be quite isolating. It might just be yourself and your supervisor. Depending on which lab you're in as well, it might be more competitive. But one thing that you'll find now is that most of the bold bracket firms, you know, they have programs. So as soon as you start as an analyst, usually you're given a mentor on day one. Sometimes it's someone within your department or someone else, but it's usually someone quite senior. So you'll find that at Goldman, you'll find that at Morgan Stanley, you'll find that at McKinsey, you'll find that anywhere. So I'd say, you know, when it comes to industry, there are more of these programs, but also I'd say, you know, feel free to reach out to ex-neuros on social media. We'll always respond to you, you know, go on LinkedIn, message people, you know, we will always respond. So, you know, don't feel that you need to put yourself into the box of, you know, just the programs. Most people will answer back if you message them.
Yeah, I guess just kind of going off what Portia just said, I guess in terms of like my organization and my industry, I think there's a very structured approach to mentorship. Just in the broader sense, I guess, because you have line managers who, like, you know, you meet with quarterly to discuss, like, it's more of a conversation, like it's very informal, but like you have the opportunity to discuss your progress, anything, challenges, you know, stuff like that, like where you see yourself, where you want to go. And then obviously you have performance reviews as well every year. So there is lots of opportunities in terms of, you know, I guess, training, development, mentorship, all that kind of stuff. It's very, very like very clear, and there's a very clear line to it as well, which is, I guess, sometimes in academia, as Portia said, it can be siloed. So yeah, it's very structured and very, very easy to be mentored and to be a mentee as well.
Amazing, amazing. And I think mentorship is very important, especially since, as we've been kind of reiterating, that industry is not really talked about too much for somebody like me who's in undergrad. So I definitely wanted to ask you, you guys kind of touched on this, but even go even deeper. What networking tips would you have for someone who's maybe trying to dip their toe into the industry while they're studying, or maybe somebody who is in a PhD that might be like outside of neuroscience, but would still like to transition into the field? How would they go about
I think just really have to be open to opportunities. I think the power of networking is so important, like reaching out to your connections, kind of just like, yeah, don't be afraid to reach out to connect with people, even people you don't know that well who are in roles that, you potentially see yourself in. I think it's really important to have conversations with people to find out a bit more about what exactly their role is and whether you see yourself doing it. And yeah, it's just, yeah, all about making connections, asking questions, just really be open to, opportunities or careers that, you might not necessarily envisage yourself going down, but you'll be surprised, just what you learn from these people. So yeah, it's just, yeah, I think connection is a big thing. When I was finishing my PhD and I was looking for, I guess, at options for jobs and opportunities and stuff like that. Yeah, I think LinkedIn was very, very helpful in that sense, but also, like Twitter, academic Twitter, and it's also really helpful for reaching out to people and connecting with people. And generally, people are really lovely, and they would love to discuss, their careers with you, and like anything they can do to help. So yeah, definitely, for sure. I think just reaching out, networking is a big thing.
One thing that I do want to say is that a lot of us are first generation, whether it's scholars or immigrants. And I do know that those from lower incomes might have a lack of confidence in speaking to people within certain fields, or just downright don't have the connections at all. I'd echo on what Daniel said, that, if you are someone from a lower income household or a state school and you don't have any connections, you don't have your parents, friends, or that sort of thing, just go on LinkedIn, find someone who you think looks like you, send a lovely message, sometimes just talk about yourself, because they might receive a lot of messages. So one thing that I did when I was first starting out was just to speak about, how much I loved mathematics and how I was applying it. Go on Twitter also, sometimes just go on university websites and find professors who you find interesting. But I do have to speak about that confidence gap. Because, there is a big difference between people who grew up, having bankers or lawyers around the dinner table and people who they're the first set of person to go to university, within their family. So definitely, don't feel shy, just have that confidence within yourself. And we want you. So come into finance. We want to embrace you.
I was actually going to say exactly the same thing that Portia mentioned, was to use Twitter and LinkedIn to your advantage. I think they're both very, very powerful networking tools. Yeah, I think reaching out, even a cold email, if you don't have any connections, can really, you'd be surprised at how far it could go. I think especially in like very small fields, people tend to be very open and welcoming, and will respond to you because they want to bring more people into the field, because it's small and specialized. So I've always found that sending a cold email to someone that I don't know has really worked out in my field when I'm trying to maybe get more in touch with a medical illustrator who's where I want to be, or is doing different things that maybe I look up to them or something. Emailing them has always, it's worked out in my favor. So if it's something that you're interested in, maybe transitioning or pivoting into, find someone that you're inspired by, and definitely just reach out and see where it goes.
I absolutely love that answer, because I'm a first generation student, so I'm the first in my family to go to university, and I think it's really important to have people that look like you when you are entering a field. And this is the perfect segue into my next question. With your respective fields, what does diversity, equity, and inclusion look like in your sector? And can you speak about the ways in which it can be improved?
I think in my field, definitely in the medical illustrations that are being represented, like the representation in the artwork itself. And I think that it's been changing a lot over the past like several years, just because of the awareness about the lack of diversity in medical illustration. And a lot of medical illustrators are really working on creating illustrations that really represent the patient population that they're catered to, or just diverse representation, because you don't need a reason to represent people of different backgrounds. Just do it anyway, because that's the world that we live in. So I think the awareness is really causing a lot of medical illustrators to really change the way that they're creating their work and the way that they're viewing it and the importance of it. And I think that it's been a huge problem in the past, just because of just when medical illustration started in like the 1950s, it was all like dominated by white men. And so they were always depicting white able-bodied males in the atlases and textbooks and stuff. And so that was perpetuated over time. So it's something that we're working on now, but it takes a long time to reverse. And that's because a lot of these materials that are being used have been circulated worldwide for so long. And so now I think just more awareness about it and more creating content that represents like the multicultural world we live in will eventually change that. And it's something that I'm very passionate about and talk a lot about with my colleagues and other people in the field. And I'm really happy to see a lot of other medical illustrators I know also doing the same.
I'd say within my field, very similar to what Nikki just said, there is definitely, contrast. So at the junior level, there's a lot of effort at the moment, and that's to, bring in graduates, 50% women, 50% men. So whenever you look at, a new graduate class, I see a lot of diversity. Unfortunately, after the VP level, sadly, a lot of our partners and MDs are still white males. So I think, only time will tell. So now that we have this new breed of people starting work now, perhaps, in 20 years, we'll have more Black MDs. Only time will tell. However, I do know that at the junior level, there is a huge push for recruitment.
Yeah, I definitely agree with what you both said. And I guess medical communications within Australia is like still quite up and coming. It's not as established as it is in the UK and in the States. But even so, like I 100% agree. I think when you get to that, higher level leadership roles, there's still work to be done in the sense that, improving the diversity and inclusion like within those roles. But yeah, it's definitely a work in progress, but there is work being done and there's work that to be done still.
Thank you for answering that question. You all briefly mentioned, or I believe you have briefly mentioned, about being inspired by people in your field. Can you speak on the advice you would give others trying to get into the medical illustration industry?
Sorry, could you repeat the last part of that question? My internet was a little choppy at the end.
Yeah, of course. So you briefly mentioned about being inspired by people in your field. So can you speak on the advice that you would give to others on trying to break into the medical illustration industry?
Oh yeah, definitely. I would say there's definitely different paths you can take into it. And I think that if you want to become like a professional full-time medical illustrator, my advice is to go to an accredited school in medical illustration, a graduate program. There are also different paths you can take, but there are 5 schools in North America that offer an accredited graduate degree in medical illustration. I went to UIC, but there are also different certificate programs. There's also pre-medical and biological programs also. So those are maybe more like cost-effective options too, if you're not looking to get like a graduate degree. I definitely think that training, some sort of training would be required to do it. I know that like some scientists who kind of want to like pivot into medical illustration, but don't really want to go to school for it because maybe they're already studying or in research programs. I think that really understanding like design principles and concepts, and that's kind of stuff that you can learn online. There are different like art programs, and like there's even YouTube tutorial videos about medical illustration that you can look up online as well. And so taking that route, if you're trying to do it like as a scientist, is also a really good way to combine it with your research as well if you want to create your own illustrations. So yeah, I think like going online and really finding resources. And then for a student, I would say for someone who's young, maybe like high school or undergraduate who wants to go into this field, maybe like doubling and double majoring or major and minoring in art and science. So like major in art, minor in science, or vice versa, is a really great way to get both of those prerequisites and understanding. If I had known about medical illustration when I was younger, before I went to college, I would have done that. I would have minored in like biology or even neuroscience or something like that, so that I'd have like that kind of like scientific art understanding of anatomy and processes within the body, which is very vital when you get to the point when you're working with physicians and scientists to speak their language. So that's why it's important. But yeah, I would say my first recommendation is the graduate schools, but then there's also other ways that you can do it as well.
I would say very similar. So if you're at high school, in the UK at the moment, usually things were decided by your A levels. So now we have apprenticeship programs. So when you finish your A levels, a lot of firms such as Morgan Stanley, PwC allow you to, not go to university, but they'll pay for your university while you work. If you are going to do your A levels, I'd tell you to pick subjects where you'll be able to do analytics. And I know a lot of people within the arts might not like that, but try and pick subjects within STEM. However, I'd say that most importantly, get yourself a student subscription to The Economist and the Financial Times. So make sure that from the beginning, you begin familiarizing yourself with the true world of finance. Most of the top newspapers and magazines, they have student discounts. So definitely start doing that. I'd say that's most important. If you live in London or New York or another major city, I'd go on websites such as Meetup. You'll find groups where you can, attend economic conferences or go to lectures. So as an undergrad, I just used to go to lectures, at other universities. You can just pop in, but try your best to, read newspapers about economics and finance, read books about it, just go around to different universities and then, find the programs. And as we said, LinkedIn and all of that.
Yeah, I guess my advice would be probably the most important thing is just to, try and get some experience with writing. So within medical writing, when you're trying to break into it, you often have to sit like a writing test. So it really helps to, even if you don't have, like published first author papers or whatever, even stuff like writing blogs or, writing for newsletters, all that kind of stuff really builds experience. So like the sooner you can get experience writing within like, a context that's, I guess, professional, that really goes a long way. And, it'll really help when it comes to actually like, interviewing and sitting the exam and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, writing, get as much experience as you can.
Amazing answers, amazing answers. So I definitely want to transition a little bit into some skill set questions. So a question came up for Daniel. How different is medical writing from writing papers?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think something that I found really interesting in terms of like when you're in academia, I guess you're in the mindset that, the way that you write science is really, I guess, inaccessible to the general audience. I think science is written in a way in academia that it's only for scientists, like academics write for other academics in that sense. So it's very, very high level. There's lots and lots of, like really complex words and, you're just trying to get the result out. Whereas when it comes to medical writing, I think often you'll have to write for, healthcare professionals or patients who are not field experts normally. So really you have to tailor your writing in a way that, it can be actually understood. So you're writing to be understood as opposed to writing to just get facts out there. So yeah, it's really a different way, and it's something that you sort of have to learn as you go along. But yeah, like it's very, very, very different styles of writing completely, which is challenging but also very exciting, because it's nice being able to explain science to be understood, and breaking it down like to its simplest form.
I'm definitely going to have to agree with Daniel. So when I first went into industry, I was pure maths, pure data sets. And I found that people just weren't reading my work. They couldn't understand it. They didn't know what I was talking about. So we're in a much faster world now. So I had to learn how to communicate very clearly for people to, understand. And yeah, I definitely think that when you make that bridge from academia to industry, you've got to do that. Most people, they don't spend their time looking at data sets. It's not their idea of fun at all. I just want you to give them the information. So you've got to make your language more simple, but it'll be more accessible, and you will find it a lot more rewarding when you see your passion projects are becoming more accessible to other people.
Amazing. And definitely to touch on that, Portia, the question that came up for you is, do you use any neuroimaging techniques in your roles? And if so, which ones?
Is that for me?
Yes.
Yes. Absolutely, we do. So a really cool study which I took part in recently used brain imaging and brain mapping. So at the time, we had a group of participants, and we asked them, will you spend $27 on a backpack or not? And at the time, we measured their brain activity, to see whether they're yes or no. And then as soon as they left the room, we surprised them, and we actually gave them $50. And we asked them, now that you have the money in real life, do you want to spend it on the backpack or not? And what we did was that we analyzed the areas which said yes, and then we compared it to the areas which said no when we looked at their brain, so that we could find out, which activity kind of went more with the yes side or the no side. And what we were able to actually find was that there was more activity which was associated with the part of the brain where we analyze valuation. So we were able to look at the different regions, how the brain was interacting, the difference between the hypothetical situation when we put the money in their hand. And it was quite cool as well, because we had these brilliant brain caps which we used. We created a fake store, and it's allowed us to, inform companies such as Apple and Porsche and just various companies. And at the UCL lab, various companies use their research and approach them. So that's a good example.
Absolutely. Very insightful. This question is for Nika. So your career requires both a deep understanding of the arts and the sciences. So a question that came up for you is, can you take us through the process of how you take an idea from conception to completion when you're doing your work?
Yeah, so I do work with like various kinds of media. So I do 2D and I also do 3D. So the bulk of my work is 2D illustration, so I'll use that as an example. I first start out by having a conversation with the research scientist that I'm working with, or physician, or whoever it is, to understand what the research is about. And then I do multiple iterations of sketches. It'll usually consist of me doing an initial sketch, sending it to my client, and they'll have feedback to revise it. And we go back and forth like this, maybe a couple of times, till I get the sketch to the point that we both agree on and that the scientist agrees on. And from there, then I'll start to add color and colorize it. So I use programs like Adobe Illustrator and Photoshop. Those two I use the most, I would say. And the bulk of like schematic illustrations that I do that are more simplified, I'll use Illustrator. But if it's more rendered with a lot of detail, then I'll use Photoshop, and I'll actually like paint and add a lot of detail within Photoshop. And so after that, after I've colorized the illustration, then we discuss labeling. Sometimes the illustration may not need labels, but oftentimes it does, just to really make sure the information is getting across. That can consist of doing a figure legend with the person I'm working with, or it consists of labels. Usually I'm always adding labels, and I add labels in Adobe Illustrator. And then there may be a title added or something like that. But that's usually the process of creating an illustration. And then the sizing requirements may vary depending on like the usage for it. So if it's for an article or journal, it may need to be a specific size. And I'll also change the color to make sure it's okay in black and white. Sometimes journals only print in black and white. So I have to make sure the colors that I'm choosing have enough contrast where you can see the different areas of the illustration. If it's for like a presentation, it may be a little bit larger. Sometimes I'll do an illustration that will go inside of a PowerPoint. And so in that sense, go through the same process, and then I'll add it to the PowerPoint slide for the scientist. And I've even done PowerPoint animation sometimes too, where I'll take the illustration that I've created and then add like maybe like elements that are animated, whether that's like maybe pulling out a certain cell as like an asset, and then having that like kind of come into the screen when they want to click to the next slide or something like that to kind of help animate the research and bring it to life a little bit more.
And to expand on your point, someone wanted to know, have you considered expanding your work because there seems to be a gap, especially for culturally competent illustration?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that again? Sorry.
Yeah, of course. Somebody wanted to know, would you consider expanding your work because there seems to be a gap, especially for culturally competent illustration?
Oh yeah, yeah, definitely. I think that's also something that I'll talk with about my client too. Like, I normally always represent like someone who's not normally represented in my illustrations anyway. But it's also sometimes been a conversation because I've even had clients come to me and request it and say like, this patient population is mostly like Latino women or something. And so then I'll make sure that that's what I'm doing in the illustration to make sure that whoever is reading it feels connected to it in that way. So I think that when it comes to like cultural competency, like that's something that should definitely be a conversation between me and the clients. I make sure that I know who the audience is. That's like one of the first questions I ask is like, who is the audience? So I think that that's super important to make sure it's culturally competent, as well as like the colors that are being used too. Different colors can mean different things in different cultures in different parts of the world. I haven't done a lot of international work yet, but it's something I would really like to. And so that I think would be also an important conversation, just to make sure that if it's a population that's not here in the US, because we have certain ideas about visual symbols and colors that are different in other countries. So I think it's super important thinking about cultural competency when it comes to visuals to make sure that it's representative of the culture that you're showing it to.
I think that's an amazing segue to my next question for all of you. When it comes to being Black in Neuro and having this organization, and I know I can only speak for me personally, but having a platform like this to really gain a community has really helped me improve myself. But I wanted to ask for all of you, how can Black in Neuro work with your respective industries beyond awareness? Like, do you have any ideas for collaboration, or are there any specific things you think are needed right now in your industry?
I have an idea for a collaboration. So I've actually collaborated with Black Anatomy before, and something that we did was a virtual painting class. I used to actually work at a paint and sip before I became a medical illustrator, so I've taught painting before. I think that something like that would be super fun. I'm really into like doing art instruction as well, for just enjoyment, for the purpose of enjoyment and inspiration. You don't have to be, an artist to explore things artistically. I think that everyone has that creative side to their brain, and it can spark ideas too. So something like that, I'd be interested in doing some sort of collaborative sort of art thing with you guys. Any more like ideas? But I love like doing like painting classes and things like that.
So I definitely say that, we can create, a channel into finance and industry. So getting more people involved in neuroscience and neuroeconomics, which is what I'm trying to do via social media now. So thank you so much for having me. So I definitely recommend that for sure.
And yeah, of course, I guess, we could always use more Black and Neuro scholars in medical writing, be it in Australia or anywhere else in the world, 100%. But I think the beauty of working like as part of a greater advertising agency in that sense is that, you know, I guess raising awareness for things, be it medicines or, you know, promotion or for products or anything else is really like what we do. It's like part of like the nature of the organization. So in that sense, then yeah, it's collaboration and leveraging off like this organization to, you know, bolster Black and Neuro is definitely something that could be useful, I think.
Well, all I'm hearing are great workshop ideas for BIN Week 2023, so everyone stay tuned. But I definitely want to, as we're getting to some of the closing remarks, I just want to ask you on a personal note, what does being Black in neuro mean to you?
I think for me, being Black in Neuro means being part of a community, I think. I think I touched on this earlier, but just having gone through third level education in, I guess, predominantly like white countries, like, you know, like I'm from Ireland. I did all my education in Scotland, England, and in Australia and stuff. I didn't really have that network of like, you know, other Black and Neuro scholars like along the way with me. So I did feel pretty, I guess, isolated in that sense. And then obviously when I discovered Black and Neuro back in 2020, and then to just find like such a large community coexisting, you know, in like all these regions in the world and stuff, it just really like, you know, created a sense of connection, and I didn't feel like alone in it. And I just thought that was fantastic. And I'm sure there are many, many people around the world as well who've had the same or similar experience to me. So yeah, I just like that, you know, it's brought us all together in such a way. And that's such an important thing to me, I think.
I definitely say the same for me, and I'm so grateful to Angeline for bringing us all together. I'd say that, you know, for me, Black in Neuro represents kind of what Daniel said, which was finding people such as myself. As I said, during my undergraduate degree, doing maths, there weren't many Black people within my class, and I didn't meet many Black people who wanted to study these intersections. But also when I looked out into the media, so within pop culture, I also didn't see any Black people who wanted to study neuroscience either. So I felt that, you know, in the classroom, on television, via music, you know, I just didn't see anyone who looked like me and who was into the same sort of things that I was in. And it's brilliant as somebody who lives, you know, all the way in the UK to have been able to find this community, be accepted into this community of people who look like me and share my interests. So I'm really grateful to be here.
Yeah, I'm grateful to be here as well. And I think what Black in Neuro means for me is that I really love how my industry allows me to be able to collaborate and partner and be a part of science organizations like this, like Black in Neuro as an artist. I wouldn't normally think that I would fit into this area, but I do. And in that way, I think that I'm a creative scientist, if you will, as well as an artist. So I'm really grateful to be able to like be a part of this conversation as an artist. And I really hope to connect with more people in Black in Neuro and maybe collaborate on different projects. And just really happy to be here and bring more awareness about the intersection of art and science.
Well, we are very appreciative and very grateful to have all three of you in our community and for joining us today on this panel. I mean, I know personally I've taken away so much from this experience. So with the 10 minutes that we have left, I just want to know, where do you see yourself in the future?
That's a great question. I think like it's funny because like the future plans don't always like go the way that you intend for them to, which is also pretty exciting. But for me, I think definitely I'll still like I would envisage myself still kind of working in medical communications. I think obviously very, very keen to you know, be in leadership, to mentor, especially like mentor like, you know, I guess like not just like people in general, but people like myself. So I'm hoping that yeah, I can still continue to do great work and also, you know, like be a leader in that sense and to just like to grow and develop and to sort of have my own team. So yeah, very much looking forward to continuing on my current trajectory.
I'd say that for me, ironically, as much as I love industry, I am coming back to academia. As I said, from September, I'm going to be leading a study between London School of Economics and King's College London with neuroscience. So I hope to, you know, do my my PhD within neuroeconomics, probably teach as well. I think that, you know, it'd be great for us to have more faces such as ourselves within academia, and perhaps I'll go back to industry after that. Don't quite know. I think we all kind of got here by accident, so I really can't say where we're going to end up.
I definitely plan to just continue practicing medical illustration. It's definitely been very rewarding for me. I'm really glad that I stumbled across this career path when I was an artist at a crossroads. So it's definitely like, I feel like it's sort of my calling. So I'm really grateful to kind of be in an area that I'm really happy and fulfilled in. So definitely just continuing that. And I think also continuing to do outreach. I'm really passionate about that too, inspiring young people. And also, I would really like to explore more new technology. I do that a little bit now at my job, where we experiment with the way virtual reality and AR could potentially be used in the classroom in the future. And I think that's an area that with medical illustration, as a medical illustrator, we also learn new technology techniques. So I think like exploring that more, I would love to do in the future, because we live in a world where technology is advancing so quickly and so fast, and being able to apply that in an educational academic setting, I think is really the way of the future. So I was lucky enough to be able to take courses in interactivity, web design, VR development when I was in graduate school. And so being able to explore that more and collaborate with people on that would be really awesome in the future, and eventually start using those modalities to educate people even further and really get young people engaged in science, usually using virtual reality and augmented reality.
All amazing future plans that I cannot wait to keep up with. I know we all have our, I believe, Twitter handles in the top right-hand corner, but if people want to get in contact with you and want to learn a little bit more about your industries or maybe even network with you, where can they best find you guys?
Yeah, definitely. Twitter is probably the easiest place to reach me. You can also find me on LinkedIn as well. Just search my name, but yeah, Twitter. I'm pretty active on Twitter. I'm happy to chat about like medical writing, academia, the transition, anything like that. So yes, please reach out.
I would say same for me. Oh, I would say same for me, Twitter and also Instagram. I can put my Instagram handle in the chat, so I post more of my work on Instagram. I'm also on LinkedIn as well, but yeah, social media.
I'd say the same. So Twitter, definitely. And in my Twitter bio, my email's there. So you can just email me directly also.
Absolutely. Once again, I want to just say that this has been an amazing panel, and I have just had a great time moderating and just hearing from you guys about your journeys. I want to thank you so much for your time today. I can't tell you how much it means that you guys were able to kind of tell your journeys and tell your stories about careers. And I know as an undergrad, just starting out in my career, I didn't even know about the plethora of careers that were here today. So I definitely learned a lot, and I hope that everyone in the audience has as well. I want to thank you all for attending this session. Thank you to our conference sponsors, and also a big thanks to our live captioner and our sign language interpreters. As a reminder, this and all of our events will be available on our YouTube page. And if you haven't yet joined the conversation on social media, again, you can reach us at the hashtag BINW22 or BlackInNeuroCareers. We are Black and Neuro across all platforms. And for the most up-to-date information on the conference, please check out our conference booklet or our website, that's BlackInNeuro.com. And we hope to see you at the event later today, the research panel at 4, as well as the events for the rest of the week. So once again, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Lovely to meet you.